Hello, which kind of solves the question who's doing an intro, because hello technically is an intro, so here.
I say, hello boys and girls.
How many girls are watching your channel?
Actually, it's 99% male.
Yeah.
In your case?
Yeah, it's 98 or it's sad.
I still want to mention them, the 1%.
Because we love you.
Yeah, there should be more, let's be honest. I mean,
there's a huge surge in female guitar players, which is awesome, and female bass players, and more female drummers. So I think studio ladies should also be on the rise, because they're all recording themselves.
Yeah.
So technically, there are a lot more than you than.
But where are they?
Well, what? Here's the thing that, and we're going to talk about something completely different, but let's go into that. Someone said there are probably way more women watching on YouTube than we think, because of the harassment that they're getting from the freaking internet trolls. They're oftentimes giving themselves male names.
Okay.
So a lot of our viewers might be female that we don't know about, because they're getting seriously harassed in comments. And whenever you think that can't possibly be, I did many videos with Kiana, and the shit that she had to read from trolls on the internet, this teenage girl, that's pretty damn sad.
Okay.
So I can totally understand why women would want to be incognito and frolic in their hobby of music and guitar, and not be said, "Oh, I'd like to bone you."
Yeah, I understand. But there's still, it should be more, right?
Absolutely,
be more.
yes.
Because I live in the heavy metal studio world, and that is the most white and male world you can imagine.
Yeah, pretty much. I wanted to talk about something completely different.
Yeah.
And now for something completely different.
We want to talk about beer today. I found one beer in his fridge. Actually, there's another one. Let's see how long this.
You talk to the nice people. We're on my channel, so obviously they have no idea who you are.
No.
How about I go make a coffee and you tell the nice people what your credentials are, so what you're saying actually holds some value.
Okay. Once again, hello boys and girls. My name is Kristian Kohle, and I'm from another YouTube channel, a very dark and evil place. Not like this place. I also run a YouTube channel, way smaller, but more evil. About heavy metal production, but guitars also. And sometimes I talk about beer as well. And today, I think the plan is that Mr. Henning Pauli and me, that we talk about reamping guitars. And from what I know, he has a very strong opinion about that. I think his opinion is that reamping actually sucks and makes your tone worse. I don't know if that's true. No, I don't know what to say. We just wait for it. Fast forward.
I'm back. Coffee's doing its thing. I don't think reamping sucks as a tool. But my opinion is that reamping makes you dumb, which is why I don't want to do it. Because when you have the option to always go to the DI and always send it through someone's amp or whatever, then how do you ever learn what tone and what sound works? And how do you ever commit to anything? Like, if I know, Kristian's gonna do his magic on it and use his amp, I'm gonna dial in some lame-ass tone, and I'll never learn what works in the mix as a guitar player. And as a guitar player, it's crucial to also know what fits in the mix, how many mids do I need, whatever. It's not all just about the playing. Plus, the playing depends on the tone you have. You react very differently to a mid-scooped sound versus a not so much low end and loads of mids. When you have a thick, flabby low end, you will play very differently than when you have a really nice and tight low end. So the playing highly depends on the amp you have. So generally, and I will let you comment after I rant, generally, I don't believe in reamping because the performance is dependent on the part, on the guitar, and you and the guitar reacting to the amp. If you take the amp out of the equation, because you're playing with an amp, let's say, that has a lot of, even a simulation, whatever, that has a lot of sag, not so much gain, very classic-y, JTM-ish, and then he's going to send it into a modern, I'm not going to say the M word, let's say a Rev, that's very different, has no sag, it's very lean and tight. A performance that was reacting to something flabby is being sent into something tight. If I had played with the tight amp, my performance would have been tighter. So I get that reamping is great if you don't have the high-end tools. I get that it's a nice crutch to rely on if you have nothing else. But as a guitar player and someone who dials in tone, reacts to the tone, plays parts with that tone, you might get dumb in a way because you never learn how to do it right.
Yeah. In a way, I partly agree. I mean, first of all, we have to. What you need to understand.
I get coffee.
What you need to understand is that reamping is a thing these days. I'm hardly doing any guitar sessions anymore. You know, people come to the studio mostly to record drums, to record vocals, to do production work, and to mix a record. But nobody is recording guitars in the studio anymore. I think I did 2 or 3 guitar sessions this year. So people record their guitars at home. And I agree about the fact that if you get a feedback from your guitar rig, you play differently. It depends on the sound. I mean, there's much more of a difference. Let's say if you play a sound, a guitar tone that is at the edge between clean and crunch. Here, it highly depends on your dynamics, on your playing. If you play metal rhythm guitars, it's not that important which amp you play.
100%.
Or if let's say if you have to choose the right pickup or the pickup combination, it's very important to hear the actual guitar tone. In metal, you know, we're doing 90% rhythm guitars.
Reamping,
which pickups, you know, there's nothing to choose.
That's
you know?
in metal. Reamping is much more valid and possible. As a blues player, you have to. I mean, a Strat into a crunchy amp with an overdrive. Why would you want that reamped? The thing is, I see one of our good friends is one of those cases. People going immediately, oh, I have no DI. How can I get a good sound out of this without ever actually recording to what the band recorded? Now, let me ask you a couple of questions. How often do you know what the amp was that the guy recorded with? Do you get that information?
Sometimes, but most of the time, I'm just getting DI tracks anyway. Because
so nothing?
No, nothing. People book me because they want me to dial in their guitar tones.
Yeah, but you need a reference. What the reference would be what they consider a tone that they want then refined.
It usually works like this, that people tell me how they want to sound. So I talk to them or they write emails and they tell me we want to sound whatever. They try to describe it and then it's up to me to find the right combination for that. But I agree that compared to back in the days, when people were recording all the guitars in the studio and when we were dialing in tones together, now it's all my responsibility to find their guitar tones, which is nice for me, but it is a bit weird because I'm doing the creative work for them in a way. You understand?
And it's you as a reamper.
Yeah.
Yes, that's your job. You as a mix engineer, I would highly say that's not your territory.
Yeah.
Because mixing is putting the pieces of the puzzle together and finding a spot for it, not making the piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, but it's all connected these days. But I'm sometimes surprised if people just send you a bunch of DI tracks, and it's, you know, you as a mixing engineer have to decide about which way to go with the whole production, because the guitar tone really defines the sound of a metal production.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I have to say, in many cases, it's simply not possible. Like, let's say you have your mixing engineer is in Australia and you just can't make it there. You can't record your guitars there, but you still want to work with him and you want him to dial in a certain tone. You know, practical problem.
Your mixing engineer is in Australia, but
or your producer.
Okay, that big difference.
Yeah, that guy, you know, that dials in the great tones.
Okay,
and So that's a practical reason for reamping. Or something else, people, if you can record your guitar tracks at home, you have all the time in the world. For some people, that's great because they can play whenever they're inspired, and not, when I open the door to the studio and force them to play. For some people, that's even worse because they will never finish recording. It will take 5 years. So there are some practical reasons, or maybe they just don't have the right amps. Maybe they want to use that Engel amp and only Henning owns it. And, in that case,
the amp behind the Donner guitar. Sorry, Engel. Okay, let's go into this because I think you make a very valid point. If you get some DI tracks and they say, make it good, make it metal, to me, I find that offensive. I find that offensive to you as a guitar player, from you as a guitar player, that you care so little about what you have created. And I have no idea. I might know what you want from the tone, but I don't know what you played with. I don't know if you reacted to too much low end and therefore you backed off on your pick. But if you were in Australia, I'm here. You are telling me for this album, I imagine more of a Marshall with a tube screamer sound. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, that's cool. You give me a couple of albums where it sounds like this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then you help me on the phone, on Skype, whatever, to pick a simulation or an amp that I have that gets us closest to what you will later reamp. You can, let's say, go into Amplitude with me. Yeah. And you can say, well, you probably, maybe you have Amplitude. Mm-hmm. Then you say, well, I'll quickly make you a preset that's as close as I can make it to what I will later reamp. Then you send me that preset, and then I have something to play with that will later be replaced with the real deal, but that's then as close as possible so that my performance will be as close as possible with that amp later. Yeah. So dealing with a producer that has the real amps, you at a distance, and having that communication going, that would be really cool.
That would be cool, right. Sometimes something like this happens, but what's even better still is if you just come together. I still believe that's what
she said, but it never happens.
That's the commitment part of it. Sometimes I just, most of the time, if I have a guitar player in the studio, I don't even record a DI. Then we just do Then we just do a sound check and we commit,
Thank you.
If it feels right, it probably is right. And I agree. I hate it, having too many options in the end. And if the band knows, he can always reamp, they will make you reamp something, which mostly is just a waste of time and more work. So if
we have a killer guitar sound, but let's reamp it because
let's just try the Dietzel, or try the Soldano because maybe.
What if what we have just sounds kick-ass?
Right. And
why go somewhere else? Tim Pierce. I wonder if Tim Pierce, one of the most recorded guitar players in the world, with all these amps behind him, I really would like to know how much he gives the producers in terms of commitment. I know he records his amps. I would like to know, does he give people DI tracks? Because he knows tone. If Tim Pierce gives you a tone, it's going to be brilliant on the album. Why question that and then send his performance into an amp that he didn't perform with? Also, I know that he commits to effects, which is another thing we're going to talk about. Are they burned into the track, or are they actually recorded on separate tracks so they can then have different mix levels later? Because, let's talk about effects in a minute. So let's go back to committing to the actual sound. I've never recorded DI tracks. I have loads of things that I can use to reamp. I've never done it. Because Campaign Like Clockwork sessions, we record a song and we'll then add bass, we add vocals, and we come back sometimes years later because it's the album that never will be. You know those albums, right?
Guns N' Roses?
Yeah, and then ours is about 10 years in the making now. And then you listen to it and you go like, well, the guitars are not right. Well, with DI, I could easily send what we played into another amp. Yeah. But I could also just play it again. Maybe after 10 years or 5 years, I'm a better guitar player. Maybe I have a better guitar. I mean, maybe I now know what I want because with a different amp comes maybe a different guitar. So on that one song, we used the PRS SE1 with one P90 in the back into don't know, some amp with an overdrive in front of it, and it wasn't great. We didn't like it when we listened back. And then we took the Tonefox L-Caster, which is a hollow body with P90s, into the Morgan MVP 66, which is very JTM-ish. You will play this very differently. It's a different guitar, different amp, and we were ecstatic with just 2 tracks with open chords. It became a better part. I don't think if I had DI, I would have gotten the song to the level of where I think it is now, where those guitars are doing that phenomenal job. So I think for me, if I'm not happy with it, I would probably rather re-record it than reamp it. Again,
it depends on how much work it is, because again, it depends on the music. So if we're talking about metal, you probably have 40, 50 minutes of quad-track rhythm guitars with lots of riffs. So if you want to change that, you have to play that again, which is a lot of work. And most of those rhythm guitars, like the performance, you're trying to be, to play tight and hard, and that's all you do. It's not a solo. There's not a lot of different emotions, not a lot of dynamics in that performance. It's a lot of work. In that case, I prefer having the DI track. Other styles of music, you mentioned blues. If I record, let's say, some crunchy guitars with my Gibson Nighthawk that has 10 different pickup combinations and settings, my playing and the pickup setting totally depends on the setup I have, on the amp, on the cabinet, on the microphones. I just can't record a DI because
it doesn't make sense
without knowing where it will end up. But in metal, or let's say for rock and metal rhythm guitars riffing, I think you can get away with DIs because it's not going to change the performance that much.
I mean, if your palette is generally, okay, we have a Mesa sound, we have a 5150 sound or a 6505, which is the same thing. Yeah. And alternatively, maybe we have a Dietzel KTR or a Rev, whereas the Rev is kind of already leaner in the lower end than most of the other amps. But it's all kind of the same goal. You're literally going... Your goal is, they all kind of do the same. I mean, they do the same thing.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. And you're always going to use the bridge humbucker anyway. So there's no discussion about using the P90 in the, so that's a lot more straightforward. And
but we still want to know, if you just get the DI, what did they record it with?
These days they use plugins, and in metal they all use neural DSP plugins. I think it's always like the same thing. They use the same neural DSP plugins. One problem with reamping is that if you let musicians record their own tracks, they can be good. And I have to say, guitarists have become a lot better in the last 10 years at recording DI tracks. But, I mean, if I record guitars, I will make sure they are in tune, they are tight, they are noise-free.
Well, you can't change that. I mean, if you get a bad DI, you get a bad DI. And you still get this. You still get shit.
Right. And so I'm. It has become better, but of course, sometimes you get really noisy DIs. Hello, Isotope RX.
RX9 just came out.
Yeah.
You can also get it as a subscription at isotope.com. It can do magic. Moving on. Not sponsored by Isotope.
But things have become better. But of course. For some people, it's good to record at home, like I said, because, no stress. They can do that whenever they want, whenever they feel inspired to record. So that's a good thing. For other people, they really need someone who whips them constantly and who controls what they're doing. Otherwise, they're going to record
absolutely
shit.
And I mean, what I do when I produce people, most of it is producing the performance.
Yeah.
We find the sound takes a minute, but then... what voicing do you play? Mute more there. Yeah. Maybe let's take those strings off because you can't mute them. I mean, there's all these tricks that you can do to get a good performance. Sending someone a DI track doesn't fix that. And when you talk about neural, I've never played a neural plugin. I don't know why they don't send me anything. Whatever. But I hear it's very good stuff.
It is, yeah.
So. Then the question becomes, if you have neural at home and you can work with that, yeah, sure. As a backup, record a DI track, but why not send Kristian what you recorded with neural? So at least for example, you can hear the song.
Yeah, right.
You can listen to the song like, you know what? Maybe I want less gain. But then the question is, if you put less gain on it than they had, is that a decision that you are allowed to make?
Yeah.
Because you're not the player. You're not the producer.
No. I guess... No, I'm not the producer in that case. I might be the producer sometimes. Maybe I have recorded some parts of the producer, but not the guitars, That happens as well. So I might be the producer or not. But if I'm getting the eye tracks, I feel like, okay, now I am responsible for finding the guitar.
Because you have the expertise and people come to you for that.
Exactly.
But if I'm the producer of an album and I, for some reason, don't have the amp, because I don't really have enough amps.
I don't have enough beer.
I'm missing some amps. So if I don't have enough amps, then I send you something, but I give you an idea of what I want, and you decide, let's put less gain on it. I would feel that you're digging too far into my responsibility as a producer.
I mean, that's something you have to talk about.
Yeah.
Like before you start working. So what's my job? You need to define your job. And most of the time, I think people send me the stuff and they want me to be as creative as possible with it. And that's what I do. I also add effects. I even change some. I do a lot. And then after the first song, most of the time I know if I'm on the right path or not, and then
communication is key there.
Yeah.
To me, I react so much to an amp, even in high gain. I would go from the Engel Artist Edition. An Engel high gain and an Orange high gain is pretty damn different, and an Rev Purple Channel is yet still very different. So I can't imagine just taking a performance I did on one to send into the other. That to me, that wouldn't be the performance. It all goes together. And let's go into
it. I can tell you, it works in the end. But for me, as a guitarist,
yes,
same thing. Like,
thank you.
I have never sent DIs out without adding at least another distorted tone, like my vision of how it should sound.
But we could also go into the opposite direction. What if you have a guitar player that has a great amp, but they have one amp and they love it? They have a Dietzel VH4 because they're absolute Richard Dawkins. He's an evolutionist. What's the guy from Metallica? Not
James Hetfield.
Yeah, James Hetfield. Why did I say Richard Dawkins when I meant James Hetfield?
Flying Spaghetti Monster?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
I don't. Wow.
I don't know any.
Is his book here? No. Usually it's under the table.
I've read one of his books. I forgot the name, but
The God Delusion.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Brilliant book.
Yeah. I'm a Satanist, by the way. No, it's not.
Moving on. Satanists are the people you want in your neighborhood because they're usually nice.
Actually, I don't know. You might want to cut that out. But
why?
When Glenn Fricker came to my place a few weeks ago, we went to a restaurant, and then at some point he got really serious and got like, "But I have one question. Like, so you're a Satanist, right?"
What the fuck is it? What's wrong with you, Glenn?
I was like, "You actually believe that?" I was like, "Yeah." He wanted to ask me, what that actually means. Stuff like, no.
No.
Sorry, Glenn.
Okay, let's say you have this guy, not Richard Dawkins, what's his name? James Hetfield. You're a super James Hetfield fan, you have the VH4, and you insist on recording your metal album with that. However, the music you make isn't at all Metallica, and it doesn't ask for the VH4 sound. Then you have a different issue. Here you have someone who has a good amp, who doesn't give you DI, who insists on using it because he's a super fanboy, but actually has the wrong sound.
Yeah, but that is one of the problems you have all the time in the studio. Then the drummer shows up and brings his snare, which sounds like shit, but it's his snare, and he wants to use his snare because his snare is his snare, So you have those discussions all the time. People want to use gear because they've paid for it, or because, like you said, their idols play that gear. So I have wasted half my life discussing, having discussions with people, trying to talk them out of using gear that makes no sense at all.
It's like people coming in here and bringing their own guitar because I don't have any guitars.
I mean, with a guitar,
and someone did that for Gear Street. Someone came here and brought his own guitar because with 150 guitars we had here from...
I wasn't sure.
Because we had shit guitars here.
Yeah, and you did not have Fernandez Ravel, right? So with EMGs. So I brought it. But the instrument, that is something that feels... That's like personal, right? It's the same thing with reamping. If people are used to playing their own instrument... you can just replace that. No.
To me,
you told me the amp is important for your playing. What about the guitar? So if you are,
it's absolutely important, but it doesn't have to be mine or the one I'm used to.
But if you're used to playing that song, on that guitar, have done it a million times.
For
you
me,
might be too professional for that, but
I'm not picky about neck length, scale length,
me neither.
Radius,
I don't care.
neck shape. Give me a guitar, and I will do what that guitar is asking me to do.
But if you have that punk rock guitarist in your studio, and he's used to play that guitar, and he nails the performance with that guitar. If you just replace the guitar with something else,
absolutely.
you might feel weird,
Yes.
and so don't disturb him.
No, I know. Just here, you will likely find any kind of guitar that you're comfortable
The chances are pretty high. That something decent somewhere.
I mean, you can bring your Squier Bullet Strat in here. I just saw that Mike Rutherford, Genesis, playing the tour with a Squier Bullet Strat. $200 or $300 because it's the guitar he likes.
Yeah,
the guy can literally afford any guitar.
Why not?
Okay,
yeah.
So let's go into effects.
Yeah,
I always used to record the guitar, and back in the day, dry, and I did a lot on the Pod 2 rack version. All my albums Pod. The James LaBrie, Sebastian, all these albums were recorded on a Pod 2 because that's what I had, and I didn't really care about sound. I cared about notes. Caring about the sound came later. So those albums sound like shit.
I have to say, I used to blend the Pod Pro, the XT or something, rack version. I think it was the modern high gain amp with like a pair of mic'd high gain whatever. Guitar angle
that will fill whatever. Anything that
right and it actually it was maybe 70% of the mic, like the real tube setup, and then 30% of the pod, but it always kind of filled some. Maybe I should get one again.
I have a bunch. You can have them.
Okay, cool. Let's try I should do a pod video. Yeah, thanks for that. Effects.
But the point is, I recorded that dry and then later amps dry and did everything effect wise in the box. And I now do not do that at all anymore. All the effects, delay, reverb, even reverb, but most certainly modulation, all that stuff will go on the recording and get burned in. Because I'm pretty sure that...
But you're talking about guitar effects, right? Pedals and stuff.
Yes. Not vocals. Yeah. Vocals, obviously, that stays in the box. One of the reasons for delay, for example, I haven't found a delay plugin. They're all fancy and they can do cool things, but a delay plugin that will do the same thing that I can get in an actual pedal, which is weird. Why would a pedal be more powerful than my computer?
I mean, it sounds different if it's in your effects loop compared to being added to the final.
It becomes part of the sound. Right. It comes through the speaker and all that stuff. It becomes part of the whole and not added on later. But especially with delay, and here's my argument, it's not an effect. A delay is an arranging tool. Anytime you add extra notes, you're arranging. You're adding notes to the performance. So if I'm doing a dotted eighth delay, and I just play the eighth notes without the 16th in between, which happens when you do dotted eighth, you're actually adding twice the amount of notes. So, and pretty loud in the mix, you have to do that performance while you're playing because you're feeling it. If you add the notes later, it's very likely that your performance will be too busy. You're probably overplaying because you don't hear the extra notes. So delay is an arranging tool, not an effect.
It depends. It can be an effect.
If it's
but
used
more subtle.
Yes.
But for me, the difference is somewhere else. If you use a delay pedal in your rig somewhere, let's say, in the effect loop or between guitar and the amp, then it melds with the guitar tone. It becomes a part of that, which can be cool for certain things, especially if you write riffs where the delay, let's say, plays a musical
probably
role.
Not in metal, but let's say U2, pop rock.
Exactly.
Obviously.
But adding a delay later in the studio, especially in stereo or a ping pong delay, is totally different. Then the delay is in another dimension. It doesn't melt, which is cool as well. Let's say for a guitar solo that's supposed to sound, airy and wide or something, where you don't want to hear the delay, but then the delay is more like a room effect. So that's the difference for me. I use delay pedals for solos and stuff if I want the delay to melt with the actual guitar tone, and I use, let's see, digital delays in the studio later, if, you know, the delay should be in another dimension.
Univibe. That would be something that you don't add later.
No.
It gives a swoosh and a dirt and a grit that you simply need to perform with.
Exactly.
Similar, probably a Leslie.
Yeah.
Not you, Leslie. Always funny. Moving on. Chorus? Yeah, you could add later, but imagine you're playing a chorus guitar. You probably lay back on the performance a little bit because the chorus gives it beautiful space and size.
I'm metal. Chorus.
Come on, intros.
In new metal, they use chorus sometimes. Yeah, on clean parts maybe.
Clean parts.
Yeah, on clean parts, but clean parts.
Zakk Wylde solos, chorus? Come on.
Yeah, no, that's hard rock. I'm metal.
Yeah, because Zakk Wylde is hard rock.
I don't remember using a chorus pedal for the last... I do have a great sounding TC chorus and a Carl Martin chorus. They're both great, but I never used them because chorus... I will usually go for Univibe before I go for chorus. Tremolo. Tremolo, for example. Yeah.
You can stick a tremolo on later in the DAW, all fine. But oh my God, that is part of your performance. Tremolo, Bixby, obviously all not metal. You're not playing with tremolo with a Bixby.
Yeah, but it happens more often than the chorus. Chorus is just makes things too soft and too. I don't know.
Especially if it's a stutter kind of tremolo. That again changes your performance. You can easily do this later. I've actually done this by chopping the guitars rhythmically. But
which is also cool.
Yeah. But if it's part of a lot of the stuff becomes part of the performance. And think of it this way. If you play differently because the effect is on, it should probably be on when you're recording. And now, if your producer later on then decides, we didn't want that, well, then you got to record it with him.
I have an idea. You can reamp. That's what I do sometimes. If I use effects and I reamp, then I do I reamp twice, once with the effect and once without, and then I can decide later.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
And it's the same performance, you know? You can't play the same thing twice, so that is another argument pro reamping.
The thing that really frightened me is we did a mix contest for a Campaign Like Clockwork song on Produce Like a Pro, and we got many, many, many great submissions, thousands of them actually. And Glenn did part of the song. He didn't do the whole song, that lazy fucker. But the first thing...
I'm a Satanist.
The first thing he threw in my face was, where are the DIs? I want to reamp. I don't think he, at that point, and that's the danger.
Yeah.
I don't think at that point he had even listened to the guitar tracks.
Yeah.
Even if he had listened to the guitar tracks, he probably decided, they're rather thin, because in his mind, metal, 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 it's not a metal song. They were all very mid-focused. They weren't heavy guitars. The guitars never had to carry the song.
But then he was the wrong guy he didn't understand the arrangement. That's what you're saying.
But that's the thing. If the first thing you do as a mix engineer is say, let me throw away the guitars that were recorded here. But the guitars that were recorded were a result of the band in a room.
A creative process with a band and
the producer testing. And also, if you're getting guitar takes from a studio where you know the guy has 50 amps and knows what he's doing.
I'm always happy if people have their own vision, if they try to create their own sounds, their own tones. It's the same thing if a drummer, I always tell the drummers, for example, let's talk about drummers. I always tell them, hey, I got 3 drum kits. I got a lot of cymbals, the most expensive and best sounding cymbals in the world. I love them. I know how to record them and they will sound great. But if you feel that your cymbals sound cool, please bring them, because I have recorded my cymbals 1,000 times. I'm not bored of them, but I've done that 1,000,000 times and it gets more and more generic. Same with the guitar tones that I dial in, maybe. Of course I'm going to repeat myself.
It's your thing. It's your sound.
So if you have some kind of vision about your tone, if you use some weird equipment, it's better to also give me a DI, just in case you suck. But, very often I end up, if people give me their own guitar tones and a DI, and we have 4 tracks, then usually I go for using like 2 of their tracks as the main tone, and then I add 2 reamp tracks to push it into my direction or into a certain direction.
If you get their recorded guitar, do you sometimes go, well, good, no reamping necessary?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Because if it's good, it's good.
Yeah, right. And it's just, I mean, it's work. I'm lazy. So why should I set up microphones and that's work. So
because it frightened me a bit when Glenn immediately went to, I can't reamp this. And I'm thinking, I don't want you to send that through the ref. We were going through the Dirty Shirley or the Morgan with like classic-y amps and a Voxy amp, which isn't something he would even have. But to immediately look for DI, like scan the tracks, listen to the song.
It's the same with samples these days in the metal world. Like drums again, but drum samples. That's what people do. Like the snare, it's not sounding perfect. Okay, you reach for whatever, some kind of tune track sample, boom. And that's the easiest way to fix it. And I guess it works most of the time. But again, things get more and more generic. So I always tell people, if I don't record the drums myself, if I just mix the drums, please record samples of all the shells in different velocities. Because in modern metal, you're going to need some samples. That's how it sounds these days. But if I'm forced to use samples, then I want to use the samples from the session because they're going to sound more organic and they're going to sound, let's say, unique, or at least not like every other tune track production. You know what I mean? It's more work, but that's the way how you can make a difference these days. That's how I feel. When everything is, otherwise we turn production into a preset-based, generic, boring.
When I help out with tune track or some kind of samples, I never mute the original kick and snare. I help it out. I'll fill it up. Maybe my snares never, because I don't know what I'm doing. I watched one of his videos with snare mic placement that actually helped, and it needs to go more on the shell. Good video.
More highs, yeah.
Yep, exactly. Because what I showed you earlier, it was too much.
Yeah, you get.
Yep. I learned something from his channel. But it's too much woomph and not enough of the attack.
The crack, yeah.
And I wanted more of the crack. No matter what I'm doing EQ-wise, I can't get that out. So I'm helping out with that sample. But I don't want to suck the life out of the kit by completely taking that out. Plus...
but that happens a lot.
Plus, here's the thing. In metal, you can possibly do it. How would you do snare replacement in something, for example, that Felix played with loads of ghost notes?
Yeah.
Look, I know how to do drums. I really do, especially program drums. There isn't a way to actually generate a MIDI track with those ghost notes.
No.
It's not possible.
But then again, I mean, for that kind of music, you mostly don't have to replace that much compared to metal, where things are so fucking dense. But the best way of using samples, in my book, is to use the samples from the original session, because they will always blend organically with your recorded tracks, because it's the same snare with the same. You're not going to have phase issues, nothing, Or I always record samples with all the microphones. So sometimes I just add the room samples, very compressed or even distorted room samples, because the room sounds fantastic. But if I crank the room mics, I will, have too much cymbals and too much spill. I just want the snare to go like boom, So I use room samples. So I always encourage people to create their own samples. And if you don't have enough highs, just add a sample of your own snare and crank the highs 20 dB and just slightly mix it in. I don't know. That will always sound more organic and more like your drum kit and like his performance compared to any great sounding tune track or snare.
And I think a lot of the things we're talking about are really metal things.
Yeah.
Because when I think about the performance that Felix has with all these little ghost notes, like I can go and generate hit points in Cubase, which are on the main hits 2 and 4, on the loud ones or on the big rolls. But in order to grab all the ghost notes, it would literally grab all the little kick bleeds, the hi-hat bleeds. Yeah. It can't distinguish between that on that low level. And then I don't have a way to actually trigger the snare adequately. Again, in metal, you have the loud hits. How many ghost notes do you have in metal?
But it's still a lot of work with all the blast beats and all the fast fills. So I like to generate a proper MIDI track in a let's say progressive metal song or something with fast stuff. That takes time.
It's very easy.
I have to go through every fucking snare hit and sometimes even adjust them. Sometimes
just don't do blast beat because it's bullshit. Okay, nobody fucking needs blast beats. I can get my Razor, okay, and put it on a MIDI key. There, blast beat. Okay, moving.
He gave me a beer, so
moving.
I'm not going to hit him.
Nobody needs that shit. Moving. So the generally speaking, those techniques are metal techniques.
Yeah.
Drum. In rock, in pop, I help out the drums, but never fully replace because you're losing a lot of the detail.
Yeah.
And metal doesn't have that detail. And I think you're right in terms of reamping performance-wise. There isn't that much detail in a metal rhythm guitar. There isn't a lot of dynamics. There isn't a lot of let me roll back the volume knob because every amp will react differently to let me roll back the volume knob.
Exactly.
So.
I can play a metal rhythm guitar. I mean, I prefer playing the real setup, so to say. But I can give me any decent sounding high gain setup. Give me a guitar with a bridge, humbucker, and I can play a performance, and I know what I'm doing. That's the good thing in metal. One of the few good things.
I wonder how much reamping is happening in pop music.
I don't know. Yeah.
Because hip hop, pop. Sometimes I listen to something and I'm like, oh, that is very, very clearly a keyboard. That's very clearly a synth sound because they had. I mean, Kanye West said there isn't a sound on guitar that you can't make with a keyboard, but he's also a full-on fucking moron.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loves Trump, and have you seen him?
Idiot. Apparently, the whole Trump thing was a ruse.
Huh.
I think he just lied to Trump to get. I don't know. Idiot. But oftentimes it's like a synth playing the guitar parts, especially like nylon strings, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you can fool people with that, or they don't care enough whether it's a real guitar or not, then whether it's reamped or not, who gives a shit? So it's really the area between the really synthetic music and the metal. Yeah. And then you have the blues, the funk, the funk, for example. Cory Wong, you know who Cory Wong is? Sorry, you're a metal guy. Didn't want to insult you. Cory gets the old classic funk sounds, which is directly into the board. But I mean, then you have that really deep, and he did a session with Universal
funk. Oh.
He did it, but isn't he amazing?
Yeah, of course he is. Yeah, of course he is.
But he did a session with Universal Audio where he's showing like how he's getting his sounds, and he literally went into the Apollo, and they compressed it, they EQ'd it, but there was no amp involved.
Wow.
It was just like the preamp and all that stuff, but it was DI, and that's, of course, how it sounds. Super compression, and a Strat directly into the board. That, obviously, when there's no amp and interaction involved, okay, you can reamp, because it's literally played DI anyway.
Right.
So
there's no amp.
Yeah, so fiddling around with that, fine. Actually, he might actually be offended if it gets reamped because it was never
intended to be.
It was never intended with an amp.
No.
So the reamping is really a thing that's happening more in metal.
Yeah.
And my point simply is, as long as you can, even if you're giving someone DI tracks, please talk with the guy that's going to do it later. Find out what he imagines the sounds to be.
Yeah.
And then maybe say, well, I have guitar rig. Can you tell me what guitar rig amp I should use? And then maybe record something, send it to him, and then he's going to go like, yeah, take the bass out a bit.
And on top of that, with all the plugins these days, I'm not really using plugins for my main guitar tones, but the plugins sound great. So compared to the days when we were young, like 60, 70 years ago, it has never been easier to get a fantastic guitar tone.
100%.
Out of the box, So everybody out there right now watching has a million of plugins, making much better sounds than we had 60 years ago.
Yeah, free plugin. Yeah. Glenn gave me some plugin, Empers, I don't know what it was.
What I'm trying to say is, why don't you just spend some time on finding whatever you think is the perfect guitar tone for your recording? That's what guitarists used to do. They played with several amps in the store or in their rehearsal space, combined with a cabinet, with whatever. And then they went to the studio and said, "This is my tone. Please capture it."
Also,
so now you can even go further and just create a preset. Say, "That's my tone." And at least show it to the producer, to me, to him, somebody.
Record the eye and record that tone.
Then I can still say, "Okay, yeah, nice try. It sucks. I can do it better." But there's something to talk about, and maybe you come up with something. A lot of the, at least in metal, great and unique guitar tones have been accidents. The whole HM2 pedal thing, the Swedish chainsaw guitar sound from the 90s. I think they just had one fucking pedal and it sounded like shit, and that's how they.
It still sounds like shit.
Right. So that's not. You don't have to be, a professional producer to decide what's a good guitar tone and whatnot. You know what I mean?
And when I'm saying recording DI or reamping makes you dumb, it doesn't make you learn. So even though you might not have the amp, why not get a Kristian's course, how to do guitar miking goodly?
Put a link here, please. I want to make me rich and famous.
What's your course?
High gain guitar tone crafting.
High gain guitar tone crafting. Okay, that's using real amps,
Yeah.
real pedals, and real amp.
But I'm talking about the methods. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
That's my point. Yeah. I can go into Amplitude or whatever, and I see the virtual cab and the virtual mics. If I know what you did in the course,
yes.
It doesn't matter if I do it on a real cab or virtually. At least I've learned the craft, and then I play around. Yeah. And even if it later goes to Kristian and he reamps it, you have gotten closer to what he would actually later do.
Yes.
There's also, if you're dealing with virtual amps, Scott from Chernobyl Studios, Guitar Tone Mastery. Yeah. I think you get that on spectredigital.com, where he deals only with extreme metal tones in simulations, only virtual instruments. So learning there helps. Can it be re-recorded later? Yes. But I think you should do your part to get as close as possible to your vision of what the song should be. Yes. If he then says, dude, way too much low end, I'm going to go through the blah, blah, blah with a blah, blah, that's fine. But starting out with, it's going to get reamped, it's okay if I don't know how to do it, and it's okay if it sounds shit while I record it. What's going to happen with it? You're going to have a shit performance.
Right. And you always have the DI as a backup. And I'm on a mission to make metal sound less generic these days, because everything sounds the same and everybody's using the same plugins or the same Kemper profiles or the same IRs. So I can just encourage, everybody, every guitarist out there to try some stuff, try some weird shit. And because, we've had enough of 5150 going into a Mesa Boogie cab mic'd with a 57. It's a great sound, but we've been there. So try something else.
Don't be dumb.
Like me.
That was us and the soapbox that we were standing on, even though it's a couch. Thank you to Leslie for switching. Thanks to Kristian for hanging out and drinking my beer. Because
there's another one, right?
What? Yeah,
there's another one in there.
Don't you have to drive? How many beers can you have before you can't drive anymore?
5. No.
Wow. The Satanist.
Himself.
The guy in the funny sweater. The funny thing is, to me, that's a funny sweater.
Oh, funny. Well, what's wrong with you today?
It's like I bought a new sweater that's not funny. Because Leslie always has to run around with me and it's very embarrassing, and I wanted her to...
I thought it was because of me that you...
Oh no, fuck you.
Wanted to look a little more metal.
A little more metal. Tiny metal. You've been awesome. Links below to his courses and Scott's course and all that stuff. I don't make money. I should make money on that. I don't know, somehow.
Yeah. Hello, Scott.
And, hey, Glenn. Love you. The animals at the end.
Animals at the end?
Ja, Animals at the end.
Ach, du hast immer Tiere am Ende.
Ja. Ah, das kann doch gerettet.
Jetzt kommt jetzt.
And you won't surrender to the blind leading the blind.